I'll be honest, mate. It was shit. It was absolutely shit. It was a shit time. I had to deal with people who I thought were more than colleagues, were actually friends, who suddenly turned around and it didn't do it in a diplomatic way. It wasn't like they called me up. It wasn't like they sent me a message. They just put it on social media.
Welcome to Happy Millionaire, a show about how to make profit with a positive impact
and stay happy along the way.
We'll be going through your life in different parts, but I'm going to start off just going straight in the deep end, right? So I know, because I've listened to your interviews before, that there was this one situation which took place when you're quite young. I believe you're like 11 or 12, and your mum took you to a room and she shared some information with you. And I know that played quite a big part in what's made you in this position here today. So it'd be great if you could just share what happened on that day in that room.
Definitely. I think that's a good place to start, actually, because I only really came to realize just how pivotal that event was for me fairly recently. And when I say fairly recently, I would say the last 5-6 years. But long story short, what happened when I was younger is my mum would suffer from anaphylactic attacks. So for the listeners, that's like worst form of allergy, where your blood pressure drops, you can lose consciousness, you go into shock. There's a number of different reasons why people can go into shock. Sometimes it's cardiogenic, sometimes it's due to allergic reactions. And in this case, it appeared that mum, for no reason, would have these attacks. And there wasn't a trigger found. So that sort of was the start of her journey as a patient. And during that time, me and the rest of the family were always on high alert, right? We had to make sure that, if mum was driving or mum was out, we'd make sure that we always had a telephone or the ability to call an ambulance, because these could happen just randomly. And they did, once every few months or something like that. And if anyone's ever had the experience, it's pretty shocking. One of the things that my mum thought was really useful for me to know how to do was deliver adrenaline via an EpiPen. And so I remember vividly one day my mum called me into the lounge and said, look, mummy needs her medication. Here is this pen. What you need to do is take the lid off and then push it into my thigh until you hear a click. I was probably 11 or 12 at this point, so fairly young. And so I pushed this in. I remember the time taking the lid off and stuff, really, really freaked out and scared and all the rest of it. Pushed this in, and then she feigned rubbing her thigh. And it was a dummy EpiPen, but she was like, look, you've learned how now to inject me with adrenaline if I ever need it in the future. And that was my first sort of experience of medicine and how important it was. And I think watching my mum, A, be diagnosed with a condition, B, having had medical treatments and pharmaceuticals to treat it, but also C, overcoming it using a diet and lifestyle approach. She went back to Ayurvedic principles, she went back to clean eating, looking at her guts, doing more yoga and lifestyle meditation. She had all those Deepak Chopra tapes. I don't know if you remember that when we were kids, that we had those tapes that always used to get screwed up in the cassette player. And and Sony Walkmans, so she would have that and stuff. So I watched her sort of get stronger and really learn about her body, and that kind of instilled in us more of an Ayurvedic culture than perhaps we would have had otherwise. Had mum, every Indian family is all about the turmeric and rubbing coconut oil, and my dad's obsessed with mustard oil. He puts it all over his legs and all the rest of it, cures everything apparently. But I think more so than most families, because mum had those issues quite early on in her life, that really instilled a culture within us as a family of looking at food as medicine. yeah, that kind of like planted the seed, if I'm honest, about how important it is to look after your well-being, but also like it probably was the reason why I went on to do medicine, because neither of my parents, who are both in business, I should say, wanted me to go into medicine. It's kind of unusual for an Indian family not to want their kids to go into medicine, but that was the case for me.
I can only I don't know, I'm just trying to visualize that moment, right? And you're 11 years old, you probably had a busy day at school, probably been in a tuck shop, ate too many sweets and chocolates, or was on the playground, and then you're thrown into that situation, which is with your mum, right? At that, our parents are the most important people, and to watch your mum go through that, it must have felt like probably quite difficult, because it's someone who's really powerful, you probably saw, and then going through this pain, right? And deep down you probably knew that if you don't put this pen essentially into her leg, like, she may die.
I'll be honest, mate, it's quite hard to remember exactly how I was feeling as like an 11-year-old, but I do remember it was a lot of fear. It was very nervous. I remember like uncapping the top of the EpiPen and just getting quite fidgety and stuff, and that sense of relief as well, like straight away afterwards, like, oh, that was just a dummy. But then like the realization that, you know what, I can do this, I have the capacity and the ability to help if needed. And that, I think that gave me that sense of identity that perhaps I didn't have before, about the ability to heal, the ability to cure, the ability and to want to sort of establish myself as that more, and probably why I went into medicine. And we're skipping forward a little bit here, but like that sense of identity being embedded from an 11-year-old to now, like I'm turning 37 tomorrow, it spanned over 20 years, and me now wanting to change direction and sort of dive into a more entrepreneurial skin and change sort of like my vocation has come with a lot of sort of internal friction, right? Like an internal sort of like, am I doing the right thing? I'm turning back on something that I've dedicated my whole life to. I'm still helping people in a way, through Doctor's Kitchen and preventive medicine. I truly believe like food is the route to, healing a lot of people. But still, when you're not doing the day-to-day, when you're not there, like jabbing people with a needle, it's a different experience, right?
It's incredible to see that, and I think all of us humans go through situations, but sometimes like your one was, huge.
Yeah, I think moments in one's life can be expanded upon, which can always be looked at in two different ways. Some people might look at that experience like, how traumatic and horrific was that for an 11-year-old to be given that sort of responsibility that could have like really tormented me for the rest of my life. If anything, I applied a growth mindset to it. Caroline Dweck, who's written an incredible book about growth mindsets, talks about it's the way in which we approach scenarios and events in our life that can either lead to growth or lead to destruction. And I'm reading a lot about Stoicism at the moment, in that our perception of external events leads something to be either positive or negative. And so I always try and look at scenarios, however small or large, and try and see the benefit of those, whether that's in business, whether that's in the day-to-day, whether it's, scenarios that you see on the news, like what's going on in Ukraine right now is like horrific, and what we see in politics at the moment is horrific. But like, what are the things that we can learn from all these different events? I think that's really important. And I think part of the entrepreneurial journey is actually trying to hone that skill of being that positive person. It's something that you went through with your own experiences as well. Like, you had to sort of branch out and make sure that you lent into that growth mindset, because otherwise it kind of leads to failure, right? Or just a negative perspective and things.
No, I love it. I think the ability to balance the good and the bad in each situation is, like, take the lessons at the same time, appreciate what's happening in that moment is a huge skill. And you're displaying it in abundance.
But you got to do this like every day. Like people describe me as the guy who would drink a glass of water and be like, this is the best glass of water I've ever drunk. Like that's literally how my sister like refers to me as. Like, he's the guy that like comments on the incredibleness of the water. Yeah. But this is like, you know, I have down days all the time, as I'm sure does everyone. But do I try and learn from those days? Do I try and learn from the frustrations? Like, I was just cursing my MailChimp. I'm literally sending out a newsletter today, and MailChimp is like a terrible, unless they're sponsoring the podcast, a terrible product. It's so bad. It's like, it's so ubiquitously used, but there are so many janky functions of it, and I'm like cursing it. And I have to always like bring myself down to a level and be like, okay, Rupy, come on, like, you know, hedonic adaptation right here, you know. You didn't have the ability to like send an email to thousands of people prior to this, so just check yourself. So yeah, you got to hone this skill every single day and every single moment, otherwise, you know, it's just hot air.
No, totally. I actually don't mind MailChimp, so I'll be the even side. But yeah, I get it. Look, I think all tech has got some shit parts.
Yeah.
All right, we'll talk about that. By the way, I do know a lot about that space, so we can chat about that one offline. All right, so that event happened, right? And I'm going to fast forward, like, for people, you know, you went to Imperial Uni, you went to one of the top medicine schools, and then became a GP and really successful at that. And then I know during that period when you are becoming a GP, like, certain voices start coming to you and saying, hey, look, remember that moment, like, food is medicine, like, that message is so important. And I know you were traveling around the world, you had some epic stories, which maybe on another podcast we can share for jokes, but I know there was this moment in Australia, you're in Australia, and suddenly that voice inside you is saying, Rupy, food is medicine, that voice is getting so loud that, yeah, you're hearing it. Like, can you take us to that moment?
The main bit of the story, I think, that we've skipped over slightly is me getting ill myself. So when I became a junior doctor, I started suffering from arrhythmia, which is, you know, a fancy word for irregular heart rhythm. My heartbeat was like going 200 beats per minute. Good Delicious, who is our producer, was a friend and has been a friend since then, actually, since I was at
the Legend of Legends
Hospital. The Legend of Legends, who is our producer that will never be heard on this podcast because he's too shy. But he was a doctor at the same District General Hospital as me when I was starting as a junior. It was like 2009, so like going back well over 10 years now. And I just flipped into atrial fibrillation for no reason, no triggers. I was a bit tired. I've been like, 10 days of night shifts or whatever. Anyone who's a doctor or knows a doctor knows about how grueling those are. And that's really like one of the turning points of my life. The fact that I was for 1 second a doctor, and then the next moment I was a patient, and I was like in a hospital bed and hooked up to the cardiac monitor and all the rest of it. Anyway, long story short, after going to see a whole bunch of different cardiologists and getting treatment and being put on medications and being told I need to have an ablation, which is a cardiac intervention, I had my mum talking to me saying, you need to think about your lifestyle, you need to think about your diet before you entertain something more drastic like a cardiac intervention. And honestly, like, I'd forgotten a lot of those things that my mum was doing, and that actually led me to go into medicine in the first place during medical school. Because when you're at med school, you're drilled in a certain way of doing things. And there's a reason why, because, we practice evidence-based medicine. You don't want cavaliers. It's not like entrepreneurship where you're actually rewarded for zigging where everyone else is zagging. Everyone needs to practice uniformly. And that's the kind of construct that I was working in. And so when she was saying, you need to do diet and lifestyle, no one else is talking about that kind of stuff, I really didn't appreciate it. But to appease her, I really basically went in, try to improve my diet and lifestyle. I've talked about this in another podcast, so I won't go into too many of the details, but looking after my gut health, making sure I had a plant predominant diet, making sure that when I wasn't doing night shifts, I was like sleeping better. I was doing a whole bunch of other things, meditation, slowing down my breath rate, all these different things. And then my AF episodes just went, and that was a turning point for me. That was like, okay, there's something in here, there's something in diet and lifestyle, and this is something that I need to talk to patients about. And so I didn't develop the confidence to actually have those conversations with patients until I was fully qualified as a GP. I'd been working for a number of years. I happened to be in Australia, and I started thinking to myself, okay, well, I need to start talking about this in a more public forum rather than just in the confines of a private consultation room with patients. And that's when I started putting stuff out on Instagram, as everyone does.
So you've got these solutions now, and they're working, right? I guess what moment did you have that confidence to actually go and put on Instagram? Because at that moment, okay, Instagram was like, it's buzzing now. It's buzzing. There's a vibe there. There's a party. You're like, okay, let's join the party and let's go with this food is medicine angle. What gave you the ultimate confidence? Because I guess you knew it was right, but then there's probably some stuff holding you back as well, or was it just like, hey, let's go for it?
I was holding back for years. I was repressed. I was like, I remember chatting to a buddy of mine, Pat, who's a GP now, back in 2012 about this idea, this concept that I called Doctor's Kitchen because I thought it was a cute name. More than anything, it was just, something that I wanted to put out there just because I wanted to share it with patients. Man, I kept that stuff to myself. There's like videos of me like doing cooking sessions that no one will ever see. It's literally just like me flopping my lines, me like not cutting things properly, trying to manage cooking and then looking at a camera at the same time, like all this different, these different skills that I now sort of take for granted. I was like kind of honing them in the background, and I chat to a few people about it. I'll be honest, I wasn't like building in public, which is what I advise now, to like fail in public, because that's how you learn quickly. It's like, you got a tech product. The worst you can do, unless it's like something absolutely magical or transformative, is build it in stealth mode. Like whenever I hear that from entrepreneurs, I'm like, face plant. You want to build in public and you want to get it in front of customers as soon as possible so they can tell you where you're flopping and you can make it a better product. That's my experience of it anyway. I hold my hand up. I stand to be corrected by the master of everything tech related, which is Jay Radia. But my impression is that I should have started a lot earlier than I did. But I kind of started it in my own sort of pace. So I spoke to a few people about it, and they were like, Rupy, you got to do this. You got to put it out there. I spoke to Amit about it, and a bunch of other people, and they're like, yeah, definitely do it. And I was so scared about clicking record on that camera and pushing publish, about the backlash, about some doctor talking about food is medicine, about like putting my head above the parapet, all these different sort of things that hold you back. And that's what, comes from like doing a whole bunch of reps. It's like this podcast, we've talked about it for a little while. We talked about you building your personal brand. And I think it's the case of having to do the work and putting the reps in that will make you a much better interviewer, a much better public speaker, and a much better person who can build that personal brand. Because you're an amazing public speaker. I mean, you built companies, God's sake, you've done all these things, but it's a different skill set that you can only really hone by practicing.
No, totally. And I can totally relate to that. Obviously, I'm interviewing you here today, and it's unique, right? It's live. I know it's going to potentially be listened to my mum, and that's it probably. But, I think it's a great, it's a great experience.
Joe's
and like, I think what, yeah.
Your mum's a massive fan. I love it. But they're so like, funny.
Oh, she's a huge fan of yours. I still remember when she first met you. Like, it was actually on my birthday, and we're going off on one, sorry, but like literally it was my birthday. We're doing bowling in Shoreditch, All Star Lanes, and she saw you and she saw me, and she actually ran to you, demanded a selfie, and it was like a proper like idol moment or like celebrity moment for her. She took a photo of you, then she asked for 5 photos. I think it was like 5 or 7. She wasn't happy with the first, and then she got the photo, and then I think she just gave you a hug and ran off and like was giddy. So it was nice to see my mum experience that. But no, it's
so funny.
That moment was good. But yeah, no, going back to that moment, like I guess, you know, a lot of us have got these aspirations, right? This is your aspiration, to make food is medicine. Like, you know, food is medicine, right? You were one of the first people to really push that message, right? But I know, looking back, if I look back at even, you know, most people's times when this happens, like there's normally someone that we're afraid of, right? It's either our parents, it might be our friends, it might be our cousins, and like, you know, it's shit. But like, you know, this era that we've probably gone through, like if you're at least a millennial or whatever year, like, you know, if you were born and you're like 18 years plus, like you do at the moment get you get compared with your family, right? You get compared with your siblings, your cousins. Like there's this like family ranking. I know there is this invisible ranking that, oh, like which kid's doing the best, right? So you're now a GP, you're now like right in the top league, right? And you're like, I'm gonna like take a bit of a punt here and be this Instagram dude and hopefully spread this message. Like, I don't know, was that on your mind? Like, because I know lots of people like hope, like even when I said that again, I felt it. It's like, what was holding you like back when you look back? Because it's normally someone it's normally someone. Do you remember what it was for you, and if you could share?
Yeah, of course, man. Like, I'm an open book. I can share a lot of these things. And I think it was my own self-doubt. It was the embarrassment. It was like, you know, the equivalent of a 50-year-old joining TikTok. You know, that's sort of the feeling that you get when you're like jumping on social media for the first time. And you also feel like, you know, you've built up this identity and you have this sort of, you know, registered with the GMC here. I'm a qualified doc. You know, I see patients and they tell me their most vulnerable secrets and their most vulnerable things that they go through. You know, we talk about depression, impotence, we talk about bereavement, we talk about all these different things. And here's this doctor now playing with vegetables, like smiling at camera, being like trying to be like Jamie Oliver. Do you know what I mean? It was those little things that seem kind of minuscule and insignificant, but they actually build up in your head. And unless you can actually get over that, which it took me years to do, and unless you can really find alignment in what you're doing and what truly makes you happy and what you feel is having a massive impact on the world, you'll never get past that first step. You'll never get off the start line. And it took me a little while to do that. And I'll be honest, it was chatting to a few people. Had they given me a negative reaction, had they given me the answer that I wasn't looking for, I probably wouldn't have got off the start line as quickly as I did, you know, because my self-confidence,
right? I guess
exactly. It's like, I spoke to a couple of friends. I also spoke to one of my seniors about it. She was an A&E consultant, and she was a hard ass consultant. She was awesome, like someone I truly respect clinically, but also in person as well. And I told her, and she was like, "You got to do it. This sounds awesome." And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that response. But my self-confidence was so fragile at that time that had I not had that positive response, it would have taken me longer to get off. So I would have got off the start line at some point, but who knows, man? I could have been a GP for like 20 years before I decided to do anything about it. And by then, you know, someone else might have already started, or I wouldn't have refined the skills that I need, you know, public speaking, the ability to express opinions, the ability to interview or be interviewed. You're doing a great job, by the way, Jay.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So yeah, I'm learning. So look, I think what I love is that you weren't afraid to ask your people around you for help, but also like, I think it's so important, which, you know, that your senior AE consultant was like, it felt like she was 100% listening to you, and she could feel your passion and was in a weird way feeling what you were feeling. and giving you that nudge, right? I think so many of us get the opportunity where like someone close to us comes to us for advice and we're just like, our heads are somewhere else. And I think it's so lucky that you had someone like her who was there fully with you and nudge you. So what's her name? Let's give her a shout out, because like she definitely deserves one.
Hannah. she definitely listened. She'll be based in Australia. Right. Yeah, no,
so shout out to Hannah. We need more Hannahs in this world.
Yeah. No, we do. We need more people like being supportive. But like, you know, I think it's really important to note here that like there is such thing as like toxic positivity, and if your mate is about to have if your mate is about to put something on the line, and you know he's looking for a genuine sort of feedback, and if you think it's a shit idea, you owe it to them to say that it's a shit idea. At the same time, there is a way 100%. In which to frame something in which won't knock their confidence, but is still radically honest, right? And I know like we're all about like honesty here. You've told me many a time, we've had many a conversation where like, no mate, don't do that, do this, or like think about this, or like allow them to come. Probably. Yeah, no, you can be, and that's good because I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. There's two ways of looking at it. You can either look at it as like a setback, or you can look at it as this is an opportunity for growth. And if you lean into that growth mindset, that's when like, I'm having a bit of a knockback, but this is good because I'm going to learn quicker and I'm going to improve faster.
Yeah.
Like that's the way. Like I've had to train myself. This isn't something I was, born with or anything. No one's born with it unless you're really lucky. You just got to practice, and it's something that you do really well as well, man.
You've now got the confidence to go on social media. You start posting. I remember the start. I do remember seeing. I did even look back at some of those posts, and you're starting off, like you're getting the messaging right, you're working it out. But I know quite early on you already had some of your fellow doctors, right? Probably people that you even look up to, telling you that your message is not right. Like food is not medicine. And I remember it's a really tough period for you, right? These people you look up to. And like this is what's going to happen to a lot of people who voice their, a new movement, right? So like how did you deal with, like literally, let's just call them haters. They were haters, right? So, how did you deal in that? Like, how are you dealing with it in that period?
Yeah. I'll be honest, mate. It was shit. It was absolutely shit. It was a shit time. I had to deal with people who I thought were more than colleagues, were actually friends, who suddenly turned around and it didn't do it in a diplomatic way. It wasn't like they called me up. It wasn't like they sent me a message. It was, they just put it on social media. So for everyone so not only like, are you like having negative feedback on something that you're doing, that negative feedback is now being distributed in a way that willingly misinterprets your message, purposely misinterprets your messages and paints you out to be a fraud in front of everyone else. And, it happened on a relatively big scale. And there were things that were said about me and all the rest of it. And at the time, I remember it was pretty low. I had a few friends, a few conversations with a group of very trusted people, some of whom were yourself, and I spoke to a whole bunch of, just close people in my network that I knew were trustworthy. I didn't engage. I think there were two things that were really important. I didn't engage with any of this negativity. I didn't retaliate. I didn't feel like I needed to or anything. But I now look back on it. I'm like, oh man, I'm so glad that happened. I'm so glad that happened because it allowed me to shred a whole bunch of people from my life, and my attention span suddenly widened because I could really focus on things that are actually allowing me to grow and actually contributing to my ultimate mission and the reason why I do what I do. So it meant I could focus more clearly. It also taught me a really important lesson about being careful with whom you associate yourselves with and who you trust. And also like from that moment on, things have just got better and better, if I'm honest, in terms of the business, in terms of the reach, in terms of the opportunities. Now there's less people talking about, who are sort of in my lane, because I've built my own, and that's the way I choose to live and breathe everything I want to do. It's like you got to be in your own lane, but you got to develop the confidence to do that. And it's those little setbacks, if you want to call them setbacks, that allow you to sort of pave the road.
No, what you're discussing is, like, if anyone wants to make a big change, they will, unfortunately, people in their field will show haters. I still have that video in my mind of Elon Musk when he, in SpaceX, where, a lot of the most famous people in that industry, even people that have gone to space, they just didn't believe in his mission, and he's literally crying on the screen. Whenever I watch it, I cry with him. I'm not gonna lie, I cry with him, and it's such a. And when you were saying that, I felt your emotion come through. It's because what you're doing is for the greater good, deep down, but that resistance, but you know what? It makes you stronger, right? As you said, it gives you that extra muscle that you actually need later on, and it comes through. So
that's a really good analogy. Not that I'm putting myself on the same level as Elon, but you got to think about people who have got massive public profiles, who, to be fair, Elon does bring a lot of shit on himself. Like, he's not the best and the most eloquent on Twitter, but that aside, he loves the banter. So he's got to take what he gives as well. And, I'm not really one to call people out online and stuff, but his mission is so clear and well articulated. It's the reason why there's such a strong culture at like Tesla and SpaceX, because it's not because of the perks. It's not because they've got like a slide and a foosball table and all that kind of stuff that is the gimmicky stuff that like Silicon Valley has. It's because there's a really clear mission with like a really extravagant sort of goal, and he attracts that sort of vibe, and when people who he respects, like former astronauts, say this is all rubbish, or we shouldn't be an interplanetary species, this is completely useless, yada yada, you can understand why that cuts so deep. But I mean, he's proven all of his haters wrong so far, and he will continue to do so, I guess.
And I love it, and he calls them out, right? And I wish more entrepreneurs have confidence in like calling out some of the, like, I remember when people were like shorting his stock, he just started calling them out. I loved it. He's just, do you know what? I feel the best entrepreneurs are really good at what they do, and it's really meaningful and purposeful, but at the same time, they just have jokes. Like, I think, even for me, like, I feel that, like, your work has to be play. And if it isn't, then that's like, then, like, to me, like the all-star, like, the pound for pound, the top people, they just are top of their game, and they're just having banter and they're joking. Like, they're going to win. Like, winning is obviously important, but like, they're just smiling. They're just smiling. I know, like, and like, I don't know, I see Elon and he's just smiling, and I love it. I'm smiling with him.
So like, we're talking about Elon. He's got like clear mission, clear purpose, and all the rest of it. I reckon there's probably loads of instances where within his own company culture, it's not particularly joyful or kind, right? So it's not to say that, these are the only things that you need. I think everyone can be improved, and that sort of kind spirit is definitely tied to mission, but there are other ways in which you can improve it as well, which I'm sure we'll get to chat about on the podcast. But that's
100%.
I think a clear mission, clear visualization, articulation of what you're trying to do is really important. It doesn't need to be like a ground. Like, what I'm trying to do is like, help 1 billion people leverage the power of food to improve well-being and prevent disease. It doesn't have to be as grand a mission as that. If you're in the business of selling ice cream, or you're in the business of selling I don't know, tables or hardware or something, you can still have
why 1 billion? Why 1 billion? Why 1 billion? I'm curious.
Because it's a nice round number. No, why 1 billion? I think because at this point, it's English speaking. It's what I feel is the addressable market without not taking the piss. Like, there's going to be a number of people that won't have access to online grocery, or won't be attracted to the idea of nutritional medicine. And actually in a lot of cases, a lot of people are dealing with malnutrition for whom my content is wholly unrelatable. So yeah, and with the population growth rate, 1 billion, I think, is probably, I want to say it's achievable. I think we can get there in my lifetime, if not beyond that. That's what I mean. Like, let's say, literally back of the envelope, you got 300 million people plus in America. You've got close to 100 million in the UK. You've got English speaking people in India. I would say at least 200, 300 out of 1 billion population. You've got Australasia. You've got a lot of Europe. I reckon that's like, we could really go for that. So yeah, that's my big hairy goal.
I love it.